Hello, welcome to Cloud Channel. In this module, we will learn about what is Azure SQL database and what is single database and what is elastic pools. So let's start with what is Azure SQL database. Azure SQL database is a fully managed platform as a service, a database engine that handles most of the database management functions such as upgrading, patching, backups, and monitoring without user involvement. So this Azure SQL database is a PaaS service. So where we can just deploy this and it doesn't take long. Maximum it takes about 5 minutes to deploy this in the Azure. And we don't have to worry about upgrading, patching, backups, or monitoring. We can monitor, but there is no user involvement. And Azure SQL database is always running on the latest stable version of the SQL Server database engine and patched OS with 99.99% availability. So technically with Azure SQL database, we can create a highly available and high performance data storage layer for the applications and solutions in Azure. And Azure SQL database is based on the latest stable version of the Microsoft SQL Server database engine. So we can use the advanced query processing features such as high performance in-memory technologies and intelligent query processing. So after this, I will show you guys how to create an Azure SQL database, a single database or elastic pools using Azure Portal. Then I will show you how to log into that Azure SQL database, and I will show you how to just query in this Azure SQL database. During the deployment, I will use some sample database. So at the end of the session, we can query against those sample database tables. So let's talk about Azure SQL database deployment models. Azure SQL database provides two deployment options for a database. They are single database and elastic pool. Let's talk about single database. What is a single database in Azure SQL database? Single database represents a fully managed isolated database. We might use this option if we have modern cloud applications and microservices that need a single reliable data source. So a single database is similar to a contained database in the SQL Server database engine. A single database resources type creates a database in Azure SQL database with its own set of resources and is managed via a server. So when we deploy this single database using Azure portal, we can see the options. Either we can choose single database, and there will be an option, do you want the elastic pool? So if we select yes, then we have an option to select that database as elastic pool. If we don't check that option, then it will be a single database. Let's talk about elastic pool. What are SQL elastic pools? Elastic pool is a collection of single databases with a shared set of resources such as CPU or memory. Single databases can be moved into and out of an elastic pool. Let me say this: if we want to use single database, that is good for our low cost application if we want to host, but we can always move this single database into elastic pool. We can take out from elastic pool. That is one of the advantage. And Azure SQL database elastic pools are a simple, cost effective solution for managing and scaling multiple databases that have varying and unpredictable usage demands. And I will show you guys, I will log into Azure portal. I will show you how to deploy this Azure SQL database, single database, and also I will show you how to select that elastic pool. So before we go there, let's just talk about single databases versus elastic pool. Single data, we already discussed. So single database, we can move into elastic pool and we can move out of elastic pool. So a lot of organizations and applications, they're being able to create single databases and dial performance up or down on demand is enough, especially if usage patterns are relatively predictable. But if we have unpredictable usage patterns, so it can make it hard to manage cost and the business model. So elastic pools are designed for that. So the concept is simple. We can allocate the performance resources to pool rather than an individual database and pay for the collective performance resources of the pool rather than for single database performance. So let me show you guys how to deploy this using Azure portal. I'm in the Azure portal now. I will show you how to deploy this Azure SQL database, single database. We can just say SQL, and here we can see that we can just say SQL databases, and we can see the SQL databases under services. Like just select these SQL databases. Now we can create this SQL database using either click on plus create, or we can choose this option, create SQL database. So let me select create SQL database. And here we need to we need to enter the new resource group that we want. I will just say that SQL DB and resource group 01. Now we need to enter the database name. I will say SQL DB 01. And here we need to follow all these commands, all these requirements. Database name shouldn't match a special patterns value at most the 128. It should not contain any reserved word. Okay, so now we need to create a server. Let me create a server very quick. I will call this as a SQL DB. I will say SQL database server 01. And server is not available. Just let me just enter the iPhone is not a good practice. I will say test. Let's see if it is available. It is not available, then I will add one more number. Since this is a demo, so I'm just using some simple names for this server. So here I call this server as a SQL database server test 001, and location is to US, and authentication method. So here I'm just selecting use SQL authentication. Now we need to enter the admin. I will call this as admin 01, and let me create some password to log into SQL database. Everything looks good. Now the server details we updated. Now in the module we discussed that, like, want to use SQL Elastic Pool. If we select as, then we need to create Elastic Pool. Then it will take to the new page. So now we need to enter a SQL pool name. So, but now let me cancel. I will select for this video module. I'm just deploying this single database. Now let's go to compute plus storage. So here we see that service tier that we can select. There are so many tiers available: general purpose, hyperscale, business critical, and here you can see the high transaction rate and high resiliency, and basic, standard, premium. So for this demo session, I'm using basic, and the maximum size is 2 GB. And here we can see the cost per month 4.99, which is very less. And let's apply this. Now we need to select the backup storage redundancy. So we can choose either locally redundant backup storage, zone redundant, geo redundant. When we select this geo redundant, then it is available in some other geographical region. But I'm using locally redundant backup storage for this module. Everything looks good here. I will move to next page, and network connectivity, public endpoint, since we need to connect to this server using SSMS, and allow Azure services resources access this server as, and everything looks good. Now let's go to security. Enable Microsoft Dependent for SQL, not now. And everything looks good here. Let's go to additional settings. Use existing data. So a beginning of this module I mentioned, so we're gonna use this sample data so that we can query. So here we can see that Adventure Works LT will be created as a sample database. Everything looks good, and let's go to review create, and we can see that estimated cost per month 4.99, and we can see the resource group name, database name, server name, and the compute plus storage. So let me create this SQL database. So it just takes a few minutes. Now we can see that our deployment is complete. Now I will just go to resource, and here we can see all the details that we need for this resource. We can see the server name, and we didn't select the elastic pools. This is single database. So here we can see that no elastic pool, and the status available online, and the location we can see that. So now let's connect to this SQL database. Now I will copy this server name. Now I have a SSMS open on my mission. So now I will enter the server name here. Now we need to enter the username and the password to connect to this server. And click on connect and sign in. So it takes to the portal. So we need to log in. We need to enter the username. So I enter my details, my login details. It just takes to the Azure portal where we need to enter our Azure user account and the password. Then we get this a new window and my client IP address. Click OK, and now it is connecting to SQL Server. Now we connected to this SQL database that we just deployed. Let me open a query window. So remember, we use that sample database. So we should be able to see the sample database here under the tables. We should see some sample data, and it's still loading. So this is how we can deploy the Azure SQL database using Azure portal. So now let me just run some sample queries. Let me just select the top 1,000 rows from this customer table. So here you can see the data. So everything looks good. So this is how we can deploy the single database, and we can create tables and views, and we can load our data from the source. So if you have any questions on this deployment or how to log into this SQL database and how to query it in Azure SQL database, and please post all your comments in the comment section. If you like this video, please hit like button and subscribe the channel. Thank you.